Well, look, up in the sky, it's a bird. No, it's a plane. Oh, wait, it's a Nigerian Air Force C-130? A Nigerian Air Force C-130. Well, ladies and gentlemen, forgive me. Well, I should have started with a proper greeting before drifting into childhood nostalgia. But welcome to this week's edition of Breakfast Extra. My name is Mazino Appeal, as you know, and I beg your pardon for opening with a superhero moment from my childhood. It came to me because, honestly, the events of the week just gone by made it too fitting to resist. Because this week, we learned that a National Air Force, Nigeria Air Force C-130 touched down in Burkina Faso under what the Nigerian government described as emergency reasons. Now, that alone is enough to raise eyebrows. But let's slow down. Let's walk through the entire picture calmly and clearly, and yes, with a little levity so we don't, that seriousness doesn't knock over your morning tea. Now, listen, a C-130 isn't your everyday aircraft. It's the Army's all-purpose giants, the aircraft you send in when the mission is serious, troops, equipment, whole operations. It carries them without blinking. So when a C-130 ends up in your backyard, it's a situation that you should consider. It raises many questions. The ripple effects, well, it's not small, it's regional. It's like Big Bird showing up in armor. Friendly, but definitely deadly. And let's be honest, Nigeria and Burkina Faso don't exactly exist on the same military scale. Let's make that clear now. One is the heavyweight of West Africa, while the other one is still navigating political transitions and leaning on, alliances. Now, what the size of the Burkina Faso army is will actually surprise you. Around 11,000, or let's say 14,000 active personnel, and that's including their army and their air force. And by the way, they have no navy. That's because they're a landlocked nation. Now, I say this not out of pride. It's simple reality. You can't compare a continental contender, Nigeria, with a nation that's still trying to stabilize its backyard. So, to be honest, if it came down to it, Nigeria can actually take over Burkina Faso with a stick. But this is where the layers start to show. Because depending on where you stand, the story wears a totally different outfit. In Nigeria, many people felt that shouldn't be a conversation. But in Burkina Faso, or more accurately in the AES alliance, the new Sahel bloc where Burkina Faso belongs to now, some people saw an opportunity to poke the sleepy giant and look brave while they're doing that. And if you sit somewhere in that block, you might even swear that, wallahi, that plane is looking at me funny. Don't let it go anywhere. Ground it. Seize it. But ladies and gentlemen, it is funny, I know, until the confusion starts costing political capital, and it already is. And that confusion, well, it didn't arrive by accident. Because when two countries tell two different stories, people will fill in the blanks and their own imagination will do that for them. And imagination is cheap, it's fast, and it's often wrong. Nigerians, well, we heard one version. Burkinabes, they heard another version. And suddenly the public became the referees to a match that nobody even saw. And this is where Nigeria must tighten its communication. You can't allow silence to become a rumor factory. You have to speak out early. You have to speak clearly and even confidently. But let's talk about posture now. Now, this is the part many, well, they won't say it out loud, but everyone understands it. Burkina Faso may feel emboldened by the AES membership. It may believe shifting away from ECOWAS gives it room to flex. But flexing only works when the other side chooses to notice. And Nigeria hasn't even flinched. We haven't even stretched. Because if they did, even slightly, the entire region is going to feel it. And this is not a call for aggression, oh no. It's simply just a reminder of scale. Power dynamics are real, and in West Africa, Nigeria is still the giant, no matter how sleepy it might be. However, this situation also shows where Nigeria must improve. Slow messaging, unclear details, and long official silence, well, that only allows for whole dramas to grow legs. And silence, while it can be strategic, yes, it can also be misread as uncertainty. And when military equipment and personnel are involved, misinterpretation, well, that can become very dangerous. So now let's zoom out for a bit. Zoom out. The regional picture itself, well, it's even more complicated. because ECOWAS is trying to maintain coordination while the AES bloc is becoming louder and more politically adventurous because of its alliance. To them, any small incident carries an unnecessary interpretation. A small plane will land in your backyard and the next thing you're calling for international press conference. I beg, shift, Jerry. But the truth is this, through all the noise, Nigeria's role has not changed. Big brother is still big brother. And big brothers don't abandon their regions, not because they're perfect, but because their strength is needed. Democratic and ideological differences and disagreements aside, Nigeria remains the stabilizer, the country that can talk to everyone, the country that cautions anyone and still maintains peace. And that is why Burkina Faso and the entire region must understand something simple. Nigeria's calm should not be mistaken for weakness. Our silence is not surrender. Our diplomacy is not fear. When you carry the weight of a region, you don't just react to every single spark. You have to put out fires quietly until you can no longer do so. And when you finally speak, the room moves. And that's the balance, that's the responsibility, the reality of the West African security architecture today as we speak. You either, understand this. So, Burkina Faso, you either take this, or in the famous words of Samuel L. Jackson, free our plane. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Breakfast Extra. My name is Mazina Peel, as I said from before, and today, je te présente, no, we're not in the AES. Let's present my host or co-host for today is none other than Inam Masso. Inam, you are welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Mazino. Thank you so much for having me today. I've been
grand.
expecting and excited for this movie.
You should be, because this is a very different kind of news show. It's not the regular stuff. We take it a little light here. So feel free to let your personality run loose and all, okay?
Extremely excited.
Fantastic. I'll come over there and let's get the show started. Welcome once again to Breakfast Extra.
Good morning once again, Nigeria. And here's what we have lined up for you today on Breakfast Extra. First off, Edo State demolishes buildings linked to cultism. We'll hear about that from residents, families, and security officials, about the impact of intelligence behind this operation. Our correspondent, Amenza Bazwaye, and local respondents share their on-ground perspectives. From there, the Federal High Court dismisses treasonable felony charges after a year-long trial. We'll discuss the implications of civil rights, activism, and democracy in Nigeria with Justice Ejinor and activist Akande Daniel. From there, we'll move to WAEC and the federal government facing criticism over sudden changes to SSCE subjects. The schools are scrambling to adapt as exams approaches. And for our extra special segments, it's Human Rights Day in 2025 with the theme Bridging Principles with Nigerian Realities up for discussion. We'll highlight the gaps between human rights principles and lived realities in Nigeria. We discuss civic engagements, accountability, and what meaningful human rights prospections should look like across the country. And of course, West Africa on edge as ECOWAS warns regions faces a state of emergency amid rising coups. Analysts Alexander von Rugen and Dennis Makri will break down what that means for Nigeria's security, diplomacy, and the stability of the sub-region. Once again, we're welcome. Let's kick off with a little peek into what the Dalis are telling this morning.
Yes, indeed, we're going to do that, but let me give you a warm welcome. If I could, I'd get up and hug you, but I can't. I don't know if that's legal, but welcome to Breakfast Extra for your first time. And don't worry, I'll dance around you. It's all good.
I'll hold you to that.
We were having just a debate now, and since it's Breakfast Extra, I'm having hot chocolate, and it's mixed with a bit of malt. You do coffee.
Yes.
And you said
gummy bears.
Drink chocolate.
Hot chocolate in the morning.
All right. So if we had a poll out, can we do this? Which one is much more manly? Is it coffee or is it tea? Oh, please,
Yes.
you guys should stop there in our ears.
So that's the thing. That's what I say. That you know what we're not taking away from the manhood. You're a man on the outside, but a teddy bear on the inside.
Oh, that's a good thing, isn't it?
Chocolate gives you that joy. So the inner joy in you wants to be excited, and that's why you have the hot chocolate.
Well, I think that's what you absolutely need right now. And
joy?
you guys in production can shut up.
I mean, joy is a good thing.
Joy is indeed a good thing.
It is the festive period. Everybody wants a little joy to go around.
Indeed.
But
It's
hot
a
chocolate.
very weird festive period with everything that's happening around Africa, especially West Africa here. And I don't know what your take is on any of the issues or instances that are happening. Burkina Faso, we just spoke about, and then there's the Benin Republic. This time last week, or was it Sunday last week, we had this whole, or this week actually, the whole, everything happening with Benin Republic and the involvement of Nigeria. Do you have a take? What's your take?
I mean, I think, like you said earlier, Nigeria has come into play big brother. I listened to the press conference in Abuja as well. And of course, when you are listening, you always take everything in with a pinch of salt, because the unfortunate thing about the joy that we all look for is that Africa, unfortunately, tends to have that trait of a lot of talk but no action. So I think for me, it's come to a point where we listen in and we take in everything that you're saying. But the one thing that we are always waiting for, that great awakening that we wait for, really just never comes.
I'll tell you one thing, it's a conspiracy, but a couple of months ago we had an instance where we had the Cross River State governor actually go all the way to Abuja for a peace talk with the minister of Abuja, that's Nyesom Wike, and the president. And I said you should watch, because I see an alliance making its way here. I see a shift from PDP to APC for the governor of River State. And that happened this week, didn't it? So let me use this platform and say that you're looking at something similar happen here again. Nigeria, what is happening in West Africa, and the alliances that are being formed with the Sahel bloc, this is what's at play. It's a Russia-America thing. We don't know it yet.
At all.
But that's what it is. And I'm predicting that that's what you're going to start seeing coming the next couple of weeks. And you can put your money on it. In fact, let's do it. In any case, I think it's time to start with the dailies. Let's already begin. We're wondering what our first daily is going to be for today. We'll be taking a look at that on our screens right now. The Daily Independence. Now, the Daily Independence has these headlines here front and center for you. First big one, why Africa's professionals are trading lecture halls for TikTok fame. You would agree, I mean, it is rather easier to make money on TikTok.
And everyone's eyes are there anyway.
And you don't need much talent. Oops, sorry I said that, but it is a fact. And then apart from that, we've got other headlines here. Oyedele unveils Nigeria's largest tax relief. That is on the front page for the Saturday Independence. And that, 0 ratings on food, education, health, and rent. At the very bottom, FCCPC investigates airlines over exploitative fares. Have you heard about the fares, by the way, recently? 500,000 naira from Lagos to Enugu. Have you ever been to Enugu?
I've never been there. I wanted to go, but I saw the price this December, and I'm like, nope, let me just stay in Lagos.
Welcome to Nigeria. By the way, Inam isn't a Nigerian. At the very top, Supreme Court voids Tinubu's pardon for Mariam Sander, and alleged 2.2 billion naira fraud. Ngige charged, remanded in Kuje prison. Exactly what kind of Kuje prison he is remanded in, I would like to find out after the Bobrisky trials. Yes, I'm very curious. 100% organic Omoni Oboli Gates Baba reveal how divine intervention dominated Nigeria's. Okay, I get that. Now, let's move over to our next newspaper, which I am figuring is going to be the Punch newspaper. And front and center for the Punch newspaper, why don't you go ahead and take that?
So the Punch paper headlines really that you can see there: planned Christmas Day attacks uncovered. Of course, and here you also see that the U.S. group says terrorists may hit Plateau, Benue, and Kaduna. Alert doubtful, don't create unnecessary panic. That is what the president said. And in the bottom there, we can see Tinubu, President Bola Tinubu, saying no Christian-Muslim genocide in Nigeria. This has been a controversy that's actually been going on for the longest time. And of course, in blue there, you've got ex-minister Ngige remands over 2 billion for fraud. On the bottom left, that is, you've got inside Nigeria's growing wave of job seekers using stolen certificates. Of course, in green at the top, you've got police withdrawals. DSS officers, as Mazino said, lobby for VIP escort roles. Yes, that's an interesting one. And then, of course, husband killer Sandra's death sentence reinstated.
Interesting thing about the police and the president's reiteration about the callback of police that are guarding VIPs. I wonder if that's enough to solve Nigeria's security problems. I don't know.
So.
I don't know, but at least it will help. Let's move on to what they say is my favorite daily for Saturday. Is the Saturday Vanguard. Yeah, no ideas there. More funds, more pains. Poverty still rising as FG states LGA's allocations double in 4 years. And at the top, sports. AFCON 2025 Eagles squad raised more questions than answers. Tax reforms. No one will touch money in your bank accounts, Oyedele assures Nigerians. Because there's been lots of talk about how easy it would be for the authorities to actually reach into your bank account and take your monies. Yep. So a lot of people are really panicking about this. No need to start saving under your mattresses, guys. The banks are still safer. Even if you don't make any money from saving in there, at least just keep it there. It also helps the country. Relief for commuters as Ubasani maintains free CNG transport scheme on page 11. Yay. Bad governance responsible for coup. Activists react to Benin military action, and we will be talking about that inside of our Africa Focus segments this morning. Supreme Court faults Tinubu's clemency affairs death sentence for Mariam Sanda. Don't know if you heard about that story. The presidency had actually pardoned Mariam, and Supreme Court is saying no, that's not going to happen. Well, let's now see what else we have. I think we have The Nation next, don't we?
Of course, The Nation, the headlines right there first in clear red new tax laws. And it says banks to file reports on accounts with 25 million quarterly turnover. But at the top there, the first is alleged 150 million extortion. A power minister reports Lagos profit to the DSSA profit. Interesting. And then, of course, on the right at the top, it says frustration as a skyrocketing airfares threaten Christmas travel. And then at the bottom there, we've got the government rules out tax-related debt on bank customer accounts and banks to demand TIN, which is the TIN from taxable Nigerians. Right underneath there, we've got Dangote, who slashes ex-deport petrol prices from 828 naira to 699 per liter.
Alrighty, grand. Thanks, Inam. I think we have one more, if I'm not mistaken, maybe a couple. Saturday Punch newspaper is up next. Planned Christmas Day attacks uncovered. Oh, did I get that right? That's the Punch Sports. Oh, my apologies. Let's do sports. Now for the Punch Sports this morning. Can these Eagles fly? A picture of our coach there and a couple of the iconic names that run Nigeria's sports right now when it comes to, everything big on sports. At the very top, AFCON bring it home. Mikel charges Eagles and Catalans eye 7th straight victory. Slot recalls Salah to Liverpool squad. And United not interested in Ramos, are they? Not. Modric happy in Milan, and Nigeria National Chess Championship begins December 15th, and that's in 3 days. We're going to go to This Day newspaper. I think that packs a wallop this morning. You go ahead now, Inam.
All right, so on this day, I'll start with the top there. It says AMCON suffers a defeat as court revokes attempts to place the GHL under receivership. It slams abuse of process, rebukes agency for forum shopping, and it dismisses suits from supporting facts violating court orders. Underneath there with our very fine-looking gentleman, it says Oyedele moves to calm fears ahead of January 2026 new tax law rollouts. And then in big, bold, and black, INEC registers, it's a big number, 2,685,725 new voters as first phase of CVR ends.
Registration is good. Participation is a totally different ballgame. Participation boils down to grassroots. How much grassroots politics and engagement are Nigerian political parties doing now? The problem is we all seem to see it when it comes to the media, and it's always big, it's always top heavy. But bottom, grassroots, how much participation, how engaged are people? Do they even know their local government chairman? I don't really think so. So you can shout registration of 2-point-something million all you want. It's really not going to make an impact if the people on the bottom are not participating.
100%. And then, of course, underneath there, we've got the CSO call for more awareness. A second phase of registration begins January 5th of 2026. Last but not least, 2025 service of 9 lessons and carols. Mazino?
Grand. The Weekend Trust will be our next daily for today. I love their front page always. They have these big cartoons on there. And if everybody knows, I'm a sucker for cartoons, dailies and strips. West Africa unrest tests Nigeria. Picture there of a Nigerian carrying all of West Africa. I figure Nigeria carrying all of West Africa. It's a big deal, especially with the fractures that we have when it comes to countries under military rule and their posture lately. Supreme Court upholds Miriam Sanders' death sentence. We saw that from earlier. An alleged 2.2 billion naira fraud. Ngige remanded in Kuje prison, hopefully not luxury. How Bachama-Chobo relationship turned out. And you'll find that on page 28 for the Weekend Trust. And of course, the rise influence of a president's son. We've been seeing plenty pictures of the president's son lately, and of course you know already what's going to happen real soon. Let's wait for 2027 because it's going to be a shindig. What other daily do we have? If I'm not mistaken, we've got one more.
Saturday.
The Saturday Tribune, if we can get to that. Saturday Tribune right here for you all.
And of course, Saturday Tribune in headlines right there before I go to the top. It says, after Anambra, we won't lose any governorship elections again, APC vows. That's a very big promise. Top left, it says, court remands Ngige in Kuje prison. The Supreme Court affirms Miriam Sanders' death sentence despite a presidential pardon. At the bottom there, it says, there is no government in power. Tinubu is the person in power. He does not share it with anybody. And this was quoted by Dele Momodu. And then, of course, on the right, in blue there, it says, Dangote Refinery cuts petrol ex-depot prices to 699 naira as a festive travel peaks. And you can read all about that on page 6. And page 7, Makinde Seraike Dixon mourn late Bayelsa deputy government. And last but not least, on page 12, my wife chased me with a cutlass anytime we fought. This is a husband. And he says, I want him to give our children 70,000 per month for food. That's the wife's reasoning.
Okay. Doesn't mean you have to chase him with a cutlass if what he's saying is true.
Love is loud, Mazino.
Is it? Saturday Telegraph is what we have up next. Ambassador to Ray Ojuku Kaba, why coups are becoming rampant in West Africa. It's ideological contagion. What can I say? Elections greatest trigger to coup. They're sparked by deliberate prolonged transition governance uncertainties. That is on page 2. It will make for a very exciting weekend read. At the very top, Dangote crashes fuel ex-depot prices 828 to 699 naira per liter. You read that already. An alleged 2.8 billion fraud in Ngige arraigned in Kuje prison. Nigeria's democracy devoid of rule of law, says Osumbo. Says National Assembly, now mere rubber stamp judiciary in limbo. Many will argue for. NNPC eyes over 2 MBPD oil production in 2026, and I believe that Nigeria can do it. After all, we did succeed our quota, our OPEC quota in June this year, so if we can do that then, why can't we continue? Oyodele, company income tax to drop to 25% from next month, says new tax laws no lead to unilateral bank account debits. And I'm number 1 in Rivers APC, says Fubara. Did you need to state it? Well, if you had to say it, maybe you are not.
May not be true.
You get it?
You don't have to claim it. If
you don't have to claim it. We'll tell you this. We'll let's tell you. He insists I'm in party with all my chest and heart. With your full chest.
Yes.
Governor's defection causes stir in states politics. Like I said from before, I predicted that this was going to happen, and here we are, 2 or 3 months down the line, and I think it's more than that now. It was more than a quarter of a year ago. And here we are with his defection to the APC. It's a power move, it would seem, or rather many would argue that it's a power move when it comes to Cross River State being the country's biggest income revenue generator for Nigeria, and you would want to have that in your kitty if you are in the presidency or the president himself. So I thought this was going to happen, and I'm not surprised at all, and I will be worried if anybody is surprised. It's all politics, let's put it so. And that's it for the dailies this morning. Thank you very much for joining us. We've got very interesting stories to go into, especially our big report and the big stories coming up. Do stay with us. And a very special segment today by Waka Waka Doctor. Stay tuned, everything coming up soon. We'll be back. I know it's time for the big report. Apologies there. But welcome to our very first segment, Big Report for a Saturday morning. Our first story report here this morning takes us to Uromi in Edo State, where the government has begun putting down buildings, and also allegedly these buildings are linked to cultism and criminal hideouts as part of a broader security operation. Properties identified during a major raid have been flattened after suspects failed to respond to government ultimatums to surrender. Now, this dramatic action raises a central question. Can demolition and forced property forfeiture break the cycle of cult violence and insecurity? Or does it risk punishing communities caught in crossfire of a larger problem?
It's a bit unfortunate, Mazino, but in this report, we examine the Edo State government's demolition strategy following recent cult clashes and arrests in Uromi. The operation, driven by security intelligence, is being presented as a decisive move to dismantle criminal networks and deter further violence. But beyond the rubble, critical questions remain about legitimacy, deterrence, and whether this approach can deliver lasting peace or simply shift the problem elsewhere.
Here now is our special report by News Central's Amanze Bazwai. Let's take a look.
Bulldozers tore through buildings in Uromi, turning structures allegedly linked to cult activities into rubble. The operation followed weeks of tension after a violent clash between two confraternities on November 16. Security sources say 31 suspects were initially arrested during a major raid on November 17 by the State Special Security Squad in collaboration with the Nigerian Army and other security agencies. Leaders of the cult groups were given a 7-day ultimatum to surrender, but none complied.
It's crystal clear that the governor is not playing, and we that he has mandated to carry out the exercise, we are not playing too. Everybody is complaining about the insecurity in the state, in the country at large, and we are not happy about it. Even while we still pass this warning, some persons want to stand or want to behave as if they are above the law, but we will definitely catch up with you.
The demolition, executed under the supervision of the principal security officer to Governor Monday Okpeolu, with support from the divisional police officer in Uromi, local vigilantes, the ESA Northeast Anti-Kidnapping Committee, and the Nigerian Army. The property will now be repurposed by the Edo State government as operational bases. In a separate raid, security operatives swooped on the Hausa quarters after receiving intelligence about illicit drug activities. 15 suspects were arrested and transferred to the Uromi divisional headquarters for profiling and further investigation. Among those arrested, a suspected marijuana dealer confessed to selling drugs alongside 2 others in the Hausa quarters.
On getting there, you can see the quantity of drugs gathered, and we got these persons arrested in the process. From there, we will hand them over to the police for further investigation and prosecution.
The Okpeolu administration has reaffirmed its commitment to stamping out cultism, kidnapping, and all forms of criminality in Edo State. For the residents of Uromi, the government's actions send a clear message. No one is above the law. In Edo, for News Central, Amanze Bazwai.
And we are expecting our guest, and that's Alhaji Suleiman Ojo, who will be joining us to discuss the implications here of these actions by the state government. But before we get our guest in, you said something very interesting. You thought that that wasn't the best approach by the government. May I ask why?
So, I mean, I think for me, and we're very unbiased about the entire conversation, from a practical standpoint, to demolish places where they happen and, you know, in quotes, to be practicing whatever ritual or cult. It's one thing to, solicit drugs and do all of that, but to get the places where they're at and demolish them and say we are solving the problem isn't necessarily solving a problem, because the reality is they're just going to look for another place to do it. I don't know how, in Nigeria, how people tend to do things, but for me, I have a place to compare it to, and I compare it to down south, which is home. So I think the definition of cultism as well is something that really needs to be zoomed in on. But we have a right to freedom of expression. And someone could dare say, but this is us expressing our belief system because they're doing something that they claim to believe in. In SA, people go and do it on the mountains.
Then in that case, I must welcome you to Nigeria, because here the definition indeed does stand very differently from what you're used to. In Nigeria, it's often associated with violence, and because of the rituals that are involved, and the belief is that you have to, there's certain fetish concepts that go along with it that cost human lives, or at least just to stabilize communities, and that's the problem, and that's why they have to crack down on it, as you see. But yes, you do have a point when you talk about the fact that these demolitions might not necessarily stop the issues. It might just shift it, because these people are still out there.
Of course.
You're simply just only demolishing the
Look
buildings.
for another place.
Exactly.
So I don't know how many houses we're going to demolish.
Yeah. So we are told that we have our guest now, Alhaji Sulaiman Ojo. He's a retired military officer. He's joined us right now. Alhaji Sulaiman Ojo, you're welcome. Thank you very much for joining us on our big report segment this morning on Breakfast Extra. Alhaji Sulaiman Ojo, we hope that you're with us now. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we have him yet. We'll continue to try and make that connection go. But while we're waiting for him to join us, the report also talked about illicit drugs and the fact that these hideouts were also used for the sale of these. But it is the tribal implication for me, and I know how volatile Edo State is when it comes to the Edo-Hausa relationships. There have been many instances where this has caused community, or it was broken down communities because of the retaliation effect that happens when you do that. So I'm wondering exactly how they intend to handle these challenges that it will bring when it comes to reprisal attacks and the kind, or even the whistleblowing concept, because that has also caught people in the crosshairs as well sometimes. Well, we hope that we get our guests on with us. If not, we might have to move on to another segment. Well, perhaps maybe we should. We're going to take a quick break now while we try and establish communication with Alhaji Sulaiman Ojo, who's supposed to join us to talk about the Uromi instance where the state government has demolished or has begun demolitions of buildings that are associated with cult and ritual activities. Let's take that break. We'll be back. Stay with us. And now it's time for our first big story. Nigeria's education sector. Well, it found itself in the eye of a public storm this week as the Senate summoned the Minister of Education, Dr. Tunji Alausa, and the head of the West African Examinations Council, Dr. Amos Dangut, to explain sudden changes in the Senior Secondary School Certificate Examination, the SSCE, subject structure for the 2025-26 cycle. Lawmakers raised serious concerns that the abrupt removal of long-standing subjects like computer studies and civic education and several trade courses, joined with the introduction of unfamiliar subjects, could leave thousands of SS3 students ill-prepared for exams just months away. The fear is not simply academic, it's existential for students who have spent years preparing for subjects that now appear to be disappearing from the schedule. The uproar reflects a deeper tension between curriculum reform and implementation. Senators argue that reform is necessary, but when it arrives without notice, without teacher preparedness, without labs or trained instructors, and at a time when students are already in the final stretch, well, it risks catastrophe. Lights flicker on questions of timing, inclusivity, and whether schools across urban and rural Nigeria have the capacity to adequately teach the new subjects before the May-June 2006 exams. Education stakeholders, parents, and also administrators alike are asking, does reform here open doors, or does it trip up an already fragile system?
Joining us now to unpack what this moment means for students, teachers, and the future of Nigeria's education is Yusuf Abubakar. He's a principal of Supreme Education Foundation School. Yusuf brings a frontline experience running a secondary school through successive exam cycles and has watched teachers and students grapple with shifting expectations. Please welcome Yusuf Abubakar, Principal, Supreme Education Foundation School.
Yusuf, you are welcome. Yusuf, first off, being in the field of play, did this surprise you at all?
Good morning, and once again, and thank you for having me. Okay, was I surprised? I would say yes, I was surprised. And maybe I should take us a bit back to where we were in August. As at August, there was no communication, no indication that there was a policy shift or reform coming on board. And so we prepared for this section using the status quo, especially for SS3 students, based on the normal WAEC subject structure. So we woke up one day, I think 3rd or 4th of September, to hear that, like everyone else, that there has been a reform and that it will take effect immediately. I think that was the most surprising of all. And it's unusual of Ministry of Education, because when they do reforms in the past, they usually give timelines. I mean, phased implementation. In most cases, 3 years.
Now, Yusuf, exactly what changed? Let's understand the timeline that changed here and who it affects. Does it affect the current SS3 students? Because the government had the argument that it wasn't going to affect them. This was going to be implemented with the students who are moving into the senior secondary schools. That means the JS into SS, and that was where it was going to take effect from. So we're having contrary, differing information here regarding who it affects. Could you make that clear?
Yes, they made this clear from the beginning that it's affecting the SS3 students. And so I must make it clear, before now, as a WAEC student, you offer 8 or 9 subjects.
Okay.
So four of those subjects are pretty much compulsory for you: mathematics, English language, civic education, and then a trade subject. There are over 30 trade subjects that you need to pick at least one from. That was the arrangement before September. But after that announcement and while trying to implement the Ministry of Education policy, it became that there are only 2 compulsory subjects for any student: math and English. What they did was to delist civic education from WAEC subject till 2028. And then they made trade subjects optional.
When you say trade subjects, these are...
Okay, I'm talking about photography, garment making, all of these vocational subjects. Okay. So at the end of the day, now I said there are over 30 of them. What they did was to scrap over half of them and then bring new ones on board. So the implication of it, as far as we are concerned as practitioners, was that rather than have 8 or 9 subjects as a students are now left with 6 subjects, 7 subjects. That was as at October, November. And so parents, school owners, teachers, and other stakeholders cried out to government. But I must confess, as we speak now, we're at a good place because they've responded, and they've responded well.
Okay.
But now, in terms of preparedness, because I want us to look at that, because you did mention earlier on that it was basically something that came unannounced. It was declared, and then you, who are the educational implementers, were then brought into the game. And I'm asking this because for a long time now, there's been a bit of a juggle around what the government wants to introduce in the education sector. At one point, they wanted to infuse artificial intelligence and cybersecurity because they said they wanted to create an education system that made Nigerian youths internationally ready for the demand. Now, let's look at the preparedness from an educationalist standpoint. How prepared is the education sector? I don't mean just the sector, but those that are supposed to now implement these new subjects and the trainings and, teach and educate the students. How prepared are schools outside, especially outside of the urban area? So if we're looking at places like Kogi, how prepared are the teachers and educationalists to implement this and actually have the upper hand of, we know what we're doing in the classroom at this point?
Okay, I think I must approach your question this way. The reform itself is not the issue.
Right.
I mean, reform is good and it's necessary. you cannot have curriculum itself evolves, it's dynamic. So that's not the issue. The issue is with implementation, with communication, with the way and manner it was suddenly introduced. Now, conventionally, for any policy for government, one of the key ingredients of a good policy is stakeholder consultation. This was missing, was a huge gap. I mean, and we must make it clear. Minister of Education, they have good technocrats. They know what they are doing. The Nigerian Educational Research and Development Council, they are involved in it include professors, so they actually know what they are doing. The idea is good and is with global best practices. But what's missing is with implementation, and they fail to follow the Nigerian, their own standard and the best practice. Like I said, the practitioners on the field were not consulted. Association of International Private School Principals, schools were not consulted, teachers were not consulted, and even the students were kept.
What about the NEC? Was the NEC consulted at all? Because the NEC, the National Education Council, were they consulted at all?
And you know, they are policy makers. I'm talking about those that will truly implement the policy.
So you're talking implementation now.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. So they were sidelined. And as Barrister Kelami, an education advocate, child protection advocate, once talked about this, that it was exclusionary. The major key stakeholders were not part of this policy, and so we didn't get a sense of belonging. To actually understand and also implement this policy.
So you say you're in a good place. Now, I'll note that while I ask my next question. The implications of what they had done to remove civic education, one, not considering that, you know, there's a civic responsibility to every individual, especially the older you get, and also computer science was removed. For what reason? If you want to make students contemporary with the rest of the world, then how would you remove, what was it? Was it replaced with anything tangible?
Or better than.
Or better?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I must say this. There's even a communication gap between the Ministry of Education and WAEC as a body. It's either WAEC is not getting what they are explaining, or they are not explaining well to WAEC. But clearly, ICT, that's the computer studies, was taken off ab initio from the WAEC subject registration, e-registration platform. But it's back now. After after parents crying out and stakeholders engaging WAEC and Federal Ministry of Education. Civic education is also back as an optional subject. So now 95% of the students can at least have their 8 or 9 subjects that they picked at the beginning of the session.
So Yusuf, early on you mentioned about the standard that was perhaps not overlooked, right? And you just mentioned that IT and civic studies has been brought back. I just wanted to ask you, for them to even exclude it, what could have been, like Mazino said earlier, what could it have been replaced with that was better than that? Because I mean, before we even get to tech and all these other things, the basic understanding of IT is something that's quite critical. So if it had been removed, outside of the debates that the parents and others had, if it had been removed, what is something better than IT that they wanted to replace it with?
Okay, as far as Ministry of Education is concerned, the word there is not removed. They changed the nomenclature to digital technology. Yeah, so and as we speak now, it is not called ICT, not called computer science, it is called digital technology. Yes.
So that's a much more modern nomenclature that encompasses everything else.
The initial communication was that they are going to use the old content, that just change of nomenclature. Then the question we should ask is, if this is just changing name, why now? It's like in a football match and you are changing the rule in the middle of the match.
Yusuf, that's not the only thing. And I beg to bring this argument out. How ready are schools across the nation for digital, what do you call it now? Technology, because we're talking not, the outcry you might have had would have been from the urban parents. So our children need to be, you know, world class. But what about the rural places, like Inam had asked from before? These are, there must be schools that are incapable of, that have no capacity when it comes to digital technology technology?
Digital technology. Yes.
Digital technology. What about that? Are the bodies looking into this? Because it seems like, at first when I heard it, I thought it was a case of capacity. We can't afford to have schools across Nigeria. We can't teach children this because we don't have the capacity, we don't have the teachers, so let's just take it out. But you've corrected that. So do they have the capacity across Nigeria, do you think, for digital technology training across all schools?
That's a good question. But as far as they are concerned, for 2026 WACS exam, it's just changing nomenclature. The old content remains. And so the WACS student will be assessed based on the old scheme of work, the old topics. But your question is valid in the sense that if you look at the old reforms, when civic education was introduced in 2014, incidentally, I was a government teacher at the time, and so I received no training. They only informed, my principal only informed me.
That's enough now.
That you
Google the rest.
You teach government, you should be able to teach civics as well. And so civic itself has two components. There is the government part that my training is able to take care of, but it's the moral education part that was new to me as a teacher in 2014. When the vocational software was introduced in 2017 as well, schools were not ready. I mean, in terms of facilities. Now, teachers also was not ready. And the global best practices, when you change things in the middle of the game, you train the practitioners. I mean, we have examples from IGCSE, SAT, they change mode of assessment. And if IGCSE in particular, they will send a manual for teachers for training beforehand. Sometimes online training, physical training. So that was missing at the time, and that explains why the reform was necessary in the first place. Now, we're not even learning from our mistakes in the past. In this case now, no form of training for the teachers. I mean, even communication wasn't even there in the first place. I just informed you that at August, even as a principal, we were not formally aware that there's going to be a curriculum change. I mean, that's on their part, and it's a key component of policy making, not just in Nigeria, stakeholder engagement. Because at the end of the day, the Ministry of Education will not come to schools to implement these policies. It's the school owners, teachers that will implement it. And remember, we're talking about 15, 16-year-old. Behind every policy is that 15, 16-year-old as well. So I agree with you, that capacity is not there for schools that are not urban, that are not in urban, in rural areas. In fact, they don't even understand what we're talking about.
Wow.
To them, it's status quo. The status quo remains.
So, I mean, we know that Senate has had to intervene here and there because they are trying to balance a healthy, educational structure. I think, now, my question to you, going back to what you've just said, the training has not been there. Has there been any indication of a training taking place for the teachers and the principals and whoever needs to participate at this present time? Because, I mean, at the end of the day, if it's being, it's running.
If it's a go-ahead.
Yes, it's a go-ahead and it's running, and the teachers and educationalists generally are not prepared, then that means in the classroom there's always going to have to be gaps because they're learning on the job. So has there been any indication thus far that training is going to take place? Because yes, again, I mean, like we've all seen right now, it's been okayed, it's a go-ahead, it's going to take place. You guys have been informed, but the training is what's lacking. So it means you are going to kickstart it with the lack of training thereof. Is there any indication that training is going to take place?
I'm hoping that in the next couple of months we'll get those trainings. But remember, for civic education, at least in the next 1 year, they're still using the old content.
Okay.
At least in 2028. So, and that is why I'm happy with conversations like this, so that we're able to, because we cannot move anywhere without training the soldiers on the field.
Train the trainers.
The teachers.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're happy to have you anytime to have these conversations because they are critical. The future lies with the kids, and if they're ill prepared, well, I guess that's what we're going to get in the future. Yusuf, it's always a pleasure to have you here. Let's not wait until Children's Day to have you back again, because that was the last time we saw him.
Yes.
Thank you for showing up and honoring our invitation.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to take a break now, bring you some news, and then we've got more segments inside of Breakfast Extra. Do stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We go back to a previous story from before where we had bad connection with our guest, but he is here now. We're talking about the Uromi instance where the Edo State government has begun demolition of property linked to ritual and cult activities. We're talking about the greater security implication here for Edo States and Edo residents, and perhaps those who might be caught in the crosshairs. We have with us Alhaji Suleiman Ojo. He's a retired military officer, and he will be speaking with us about those implications. Alhaji Ojo, we hope that we have you now. Thank you very much finally for joining us, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, boss.
Good. Grand. Now, sir, let's begin by asking what the implications are. We see that the Edo State government is demolishing these properties, but we are not seeing much arrests. There have been a few, but are these properties absolutely linked to the violence in Edo State? And how does this help at all?
I would like to start by telling you, when one has action on security, there are also implications of action. The action the state government is doing is based on the advice he was given. And if the governor is seriously to fight crime, yes, the demolition will come along with this actions of investigation so that innocent people will not suffer. The Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria has a basis of protection to the right, protection to the left. And everyone in this country has a right to be investigated. And when you are being investigated, it means they have already got the truth of the matter. The law of the arm will now push the evil ones out. It's unfortunate that before Governor Okpawolo comes in, he had so many news about cultism, crime busters. But he's in the days because there's no time that he's a permanent king or a permanent ruler. But he has a particular time. He will stay in office. But stay in office, they have to come out with the current law, with to pattern out these criminals if possible. But I doubt. Why do I doubt? The people that commit crime, they are still within the state. They are still within Nigeria. They are still within the locality. Like my father used in parable. He said animals that were caught in the bush with a trap. And he escaped that trap. He said, where is the animal? The animal is still staying in the bush. And one day, that same trap will still catch him. And that is why Governor Okpawolo Monday is now be on a fast lane to run after the cultists and the criminals. And 1,000 miles are start with one step. But one step that I would say is that he is in a hurry. For investigation to take long time because we are in Nigeria. Some people will be oppressing, some people will be talking the way it will favor them. But my dear, I want Dr. Okpawolo to mellow down a little and to take the traffic action to enable them fight to a standstill of the criminal cultism.
Alhaji, if I can just butt in for a moment. Mazino did mention earlier that I think we're seeing a lot of property demolition and very few arrests. Of course, we know by speculation that some arrests have been made. We aren't necessarily sure of the number. Now, I wanted to hear from you, based on your own experience, is the demolition effective? And of course, we know that it's being used as a deterrent strategy in mitigating the situation with the cultists and the rituals that are taking place. But the demolition of the properties, especially in regions like Uromi. Is that a preferred strategy, and is it an effective strategy at this moment?
I told you before time that it's on the fast day. The government is on the fast. Being on the fast lane, he has a short time to stay really for him to be voted again. But before then, if he is keeping quiet or too slow, he will get advantage on him.
Okay.
And to set yes, and to set the pace on is for him to start with first step. If he's willing to get more advice on what the question you ask, yes, we can provide him. And within 14 days, we'll give him the way forward. Because the criminals, the courtesans, they are ahead of the government or the people of Edo State. And while they are ahead, we calculated on security practical language. 25 steps, they are ahead. While government is of 5%. It's hard for government to run faster than them, except we go over them by tactical way. We were trained. We are trained during the war, after the war. These two tactical language, they take different symposiums. They take different systems.
Alaji Ojo.
And to bring them down.
Alaji Ojo, let's take a look at the implications on the different communities that are affected here. We know that the authorities also talked about the fact that they visited the Hausa community. Now, for many people who are on the other side of the fence, this would seem like a targeted approach. And you have to consider the consequence of these kinds of activities or these kinds of arrests. Edo State is a very volatile place when it comes to the tribes that inhabit there, whether they're guests or not. And we've had instances where these has led to tribal conflicts. What are they putting in place to make sure that this doesn't degrade into such an instance where one people feel aggrieved and start attacking the others? What are they doing? What is the government of Okweolo doing?
Presenter, listen to me. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
And if you can hear, is that nobody will feel innocent until it's proven innocent by way of investigation. And no deterrent can happen when you have no substitute investigation. And that's where I want to look at. Nobody will come out to tell you it's an armed robber. Nobody will come and tell you it's a wolf. Nobody will come and tell you they're my house that they go do the operation. Why is this one hidden? God make it so. How did God make it so? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that the heart conceals so many things unless he speaks out of his mouth. And what comes out of his mouth comes from his heart. And the people you are talking will not support, even though they are aware their children or their wealth are criminally minded or they are courtesans. The best way is to strike an action that will bring the volatile way people can now say, what is happening? Why am I involved? And by the time you hear that, then the people investigation will now say the right way they will go. As far as I'm concerned, this very particular action that they have started, if you look at Black Uromi, it was a place they robbed the bank, stand still, and it's a place nothing was taking place, stand still. It's a place that passes by from another state to another part of the northern state. These are the volatile places. And if Okpebholo, Monday, the governor, his LSC, is not taking a drastic step, so many things will start from there. So the people who are saying one thing or the other against the demolition, I know demolition cannot take place without an evidence. And I pray that Okpebholo wants to start from his own so that he can spread out for other people to see his example. Matthew, that's true.
Alhaji Suleiman Ojo, we want to say thank you very much for joining us and accepting our invitation to be on this conversation. Well, we do hope that the people of Uromi are met with, well, at least justice when it comes to the situations that they are experiencing, and that the government also takes into consideration those that might be caught in the crosshairs. Thank you very much, Alhaji Suleiman Ojo. And that's it for our first big report this morning. We've got other conversations here today inside of our second hour for Breakfast Extra. Let's get on with those after this break.
You're welcome back. Now, the long-running, it's a no-brainer, I'm here with a runner as well, the long-running case against the hashtag End Bad Governance protests came to a quiet but significant end this week as a federal high court dismissed the treasonable felony charge that had held them in custody and in court for a full year. The protesters were arrested after a demonstration that authorities described as a threat to national stability. But the court ruled there was no evidence to support such a grave accusation. Their release has reopened the national conversation on protest rights, the use of extreme charges, and the broader discomfort successive governments seem to have with civic dissents. Now, for many Nigerians, this case has become a mirror showing how quickly youthful agitation is framed as treason and how heavily the justice system can lean on protesters while struggling to secure convictions. It also raises an uncomfortable question. When the court finally steps in to restore balance, what happens to the lost months, the tainted records, and the chilling effect on civic participation? As inflation bites and governance failures stretch the patience of ordinary people, the handling of this case sets an important precedent of future.
Now joining us to unpack the legal and also the social implications is Justice Ejona. He's a human rights lawyer and of course he's a friend of the house. You're welcome once again.
It is my pleasure to join you.
You're the runner she was referring to. Welcome back from your run.
And I invite you guys to join the run. And running is good.
Thank you. In fact, we were just talking about that from before the show. He's just done his run from this morning before coming over. We had to shift his appearance just so he could accommodate that. I mean, you and I are runners. I only just started this week. She's been running from Nigerian men all her life. So I guess, yeah.
I still get my calories in one way or the other.
One way or the other. But Justice, let's take a look at the End Bad Governance instance here. And the case has been, after an entire year.
Much longer than that.
Much longer. It's August.
16 months, yes.
Yes, exactly.
16 months.
Now, what does this say about the initial charge against these End Bad Governance protesters? What's the strength of it? If the justice system has stepped in here, what does this tell us?
Okay, it's a shame. I feel that it's a terrorism against the civic right to protest, as demonstrated by the government. The government, especially represented by the prosecution, they knew they didn't have the goods. They didn't have the evidence to be able to sustain a conviction. In other crimes, you are supposed to, as a prosecution, get evidence first before you proceed to prosecute. In the US, it's as much as most of their cases, more than 90%, I think in Japan, they have a 96 or 98 or even 99, I dare say, conviction rate, because they will not bring an action against you if they don't have the evidence to be able to convict you. Unlike those crimes, the Nigerian system is a shame. The justice prosecutorial powers are used as persecutorial powers. They are used to persecute people rather than to prosecute people. They know they will not be able to convict, but they will just haul people, haul protesters, haul Nigerians generally, especially young Nigerians, to the gulag in a manner of speaking. And I say to the gulag because whilst people are being prosecuted, they are supposed to, of course, the Constitution section 36 says that you are presumed innocent until you are proven guilty. But here, yeah, we know that that's the position of the Constitution. They take you before a judge, they bring up charges against you, a lot of times trumped up charges, because they know that the judge will say, in most cases, these are the bail conditions. And sometimes they are so onerous. But unfortunately, in cases for treason, murder, kidnapping, things that are things in those class and cadre, the court will most likely not grant bail, because they will give a lot of reasons. You can go and tamper with the witnesses, this can happen, that can happen. Because they didn't grant bail, despite the fact that you are still presumed innocent, it means that people essentially and in effect are going to be held in prison pending when the trials will come. And unfortunately, in this case, the trial did not come because the prosecution just refused to show up. I assume that in court, because of course it's what we have done so many times, what the lawyers to these defendants would have done would have been to approach the court, my lord, in light of the fact that the prosecution has not been present, has not taken this case serious, we urge this honorable court to strike this matter out for want of diligent prosecution. Once the prosecution has the evidence and they are ready, they can always come back to profile charges and prosecute this case. But in the meantime, the court should strike the matter out against the criminal, against these defendants, and that must have been what happened in the case.
While you're saying that the judicial system has done good by striking this out, you're saying that it has done that a bit too late and is in itself a tool being used against dissent.
The prosecution knows, they knew, and they're abusing the judicial process. They are abusing the criminal procedure in our country, which I want to, by this example, and not just this example, a lot of examples. Mr. Showore, for example, has been through this process so many times, not just him, a lot of other people who are always pressing and fighting for the Nigerian people. They have been persecuted with this process because they know that most likely the court will want to give the prosecution another chance to be able to present his case. So when the prosecution either doesn't come, or the witnesses for the prosecution do not present themselves, the judge, in order not to mess up society, they have to either give the prosecution a second bite at the apple, a second chance, a third chance. And I want to even say that we should amend our criminal procedural laws, not just the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, both the one in Lagos, both the one everywhere. We should amend our criminal procedural laws to ensure that if the prosecution is not ready to proceed with its case after 1 or 2 adjournments, the matter should be struck out. Nobody should be abused with our criminal procedure because the prosecution are practically wanting to imprison people pending when they are convicted.
Now, just before we head on to the next conversation, or to the next questions rather, we're also joined virtually by Akande Daniel. Akande Daniel is the coordinator of the movement for the socialist alternatives from the Abuja branch. Akande, you're welcome. Now, I think just going on to him, freedom of expression again, and I think I moved to this because it's a critical thing. And I know that within the Constitution, freedom of expression, which is also in the form of protest, should be able to take place. So Akande, this is for you. From your engagement with activist groups, what message does the dismissal send to young Nigerians who feel the system is hostile to dissent?
Akande, that question was for you. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I couldn't hear the question that was put forward, but it's nice having me here. Well, I don't know, maybe I should just start.
Should I repeat the question for you?
Appreciating everyone, the social movements, the civil society organizations, the socialist group, our lawyers, including both well-meaning Nigerians, nationally and internationally, who came in our support.
Akande, can I repeat the question for you?
Around us during the sham treason.
Akande, just a second, Akande. Inam was trying to ask you the question all over again, Akande. If you just be patient for a bit.
So my question to you was, from your engagement with activist groups, what message does this dismissal send to young Nigerians who feel the system is hostile to dissent?
Well, I think I can't hear what you're saying.
Oh, wow.
And we'll try and fix that and we'll get back to you. Our apologies.
Justice, can you help us?
Okay, the system is not tolerant towards dissent at all. And I can, of course, this end bad governance protests, a lot of people received the short end of the stick when it happened. I was there on ground in 2024 when all this happened. At least I was there on ground for the 2024 protests, the number of days that it held. I was fully on ground in Lagos here, and I saw what everybody faced. At some point, I threw myself in between people, both the ones who are for and the ones that were sponsored by the government. I dare say, because I saw things with my eyes, and I saw the fact that the mobilization of law enforcement, it was so outsized compared to the number of protesters that were on ground. It was almost like a war zone, the way the government went about, the way they dealt with protesters. And I also remember solidly that even the media was not spared. You see, some journalists from this your reputable station, he went around on social media at the time that they too they were not spared.
No.
So we saw that was also the time where a lot of minors were hauled into court, minors that started passing out right in front of the international public. So I feel that it was all a show of the fact that this government is not tolerant towards dissent. I also want to draw your special attention to the fact that when end bad governance protesters decide that, they want to maybe commemorate, or we saw that happened in October, the Lekki massacre, when they wanted to commemorate the people with the Lekki massacre. We see the way the government, law enforcement, mobilized excessively and in an outsized manner, and the way they cover their face and beat up people who are just trying to mark the deaths of people who died fighting for the right to protest in this country. They shouldn't be unsung heroes. They should be remembered. They should always be celebrated, because the freedoms that they enjoy, that even the governments are taking for granted, at some point they should be on the other foot. The present president, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, was with us during the 2012 fuel crisis, the protest that we had.
Yeah, but why does that surprise you? That means he knows exactly what, he knows the system.
But again, at some point, he's going to be out of office.
Well,
people like that will be out of office. They should become on the other foot. And they too, we urge them to join us in protest, because there will never ever be a perfect government.
Justice, there's still more to talk about this, but let's turn to Akande. Akande, we hope that you can hear us now. Let's test and see if you have your audio fixed. Akande, if you will please give us a greeting once again. Akande, are you there? Akande, please, can you confirm if you can hear us? Oh, unfortunately, I don't think he can. So, Justice, we are stuck with you. Now, Justice, okay, I'm being told that Akande can hear us. Akande, let me ask you this question already. When it comes to these charges that have been thrown out now by the courts, they are serious charges, treasonable charges. You could lose your life in some countries, even Nigeria here. So for these agencies that actually brought up these charges against these young people, the question now is accountability. How can they be held accountable? Do we just forget that they raised these charges and let them go? Or I'm asking what true accountability would be like for these agencies.
Thank you very much for that brilliant question. Like you have rightly said, we need to make these agencies, both the DSS and the police, accountable for everything they have done against the Nigerian youth, during the end bad governance protest. And of course, the only way we could do that is also by taking them to court Obviously, our lawyers have given the government maybe 24 or 48 hours ultimatum to see that all families who lost a life during the protest and all the comrades who were detained behind bars recklessly, without any justification, that all of these people should be appropriately compensated. And that if that is not done, we have to return back to the court. But obviously, we also know that even before now, the first police prosecutor who was in charge of our treason trial himself was caught up in the scandal, falsification, and that as we speak, he himself is undergoing a trial at the federal court in Abuja. And of course, we also looking forward to see how other individuals, aside from the collective establishment of the police or the body of the police being sued by lawyers, being sued by ourselves, we also looking forward to how we put individual of this, members of this police force and that of the DSS, individuals who shot at protesters, individuals. For instance, this video you are playing, it was the members of the police force that was denying us entrance into a public-owned institution, into the court premises. And what that means itself is that these elements, their high addedness is overreaching. And what we can do appropriately is to begin to put them into accounts and be holding them responsible one after the other. And of course, the establishment have sent them. And we have made it known that even these elements are not well paid. Even these elements are part of the system in Nigeria, but because they are being used by the Nigerian state against the interest of the individual, against the interest of the genuine mass of the working class, that's why they are misbehaving. But we have also seen that we are the ones that even protesting on their behalf to have a better pension at the end of the day. How can we explain that after 35 years, this element do not take home, taking 2.56 million naira home at the end of 36 years? So we begin by taking them to court and also seeing how we can begin to appropriately, like we have done in this video that we have shown, that we pinpoints each and every one who have participated in those outrageous and uncalled character which has exhibited those character should be taken to account. And that's what we are trying to do in the coming days.
Now, Justice, for you, let's past, present, and of course the future. What can the Nigerian youth expect when it comes to their rights to protest, their rights to use their voices, because your voice is a power? But taking into consideration what has taken place right now, what's the expectation for them?
They have to summon more courage, because I don't see the present government backing down when it comes to clamping down on their right to express themselves, to associate with each other, and to move, which are the potpourri of rights, 39, 40, and 41 of our Constitution that constitute the right to protest, effective protest.
So what does the summoning more courage look like? What does that look like?
They have to be like me. They have to be like the other guests, and they have to be like all the other, Mr. Lenin that was prosecuted, and Mr. Soweto, I dare say, and the other people. My role wasn't to really end bad governance. My role on the ground was to ensure that the rights of both the people who were in support of end bad governance and who are expressing their grievances against the protests are adequately protected. So my role essentially was to engage both law enforcement and the courts if eventually they are arraigned. So, of course, a lot of people were arrested on ground, and we appealed to the people in authority, the Commissioner of Police at the time, to release them to us and things like that. But it will take more courage, just like I said earlier, more courage. You must be willing to say, but the Constitution gives me this right. I should be able to enjoy it maximally. And I won't give it to the president, I won't give it to the Inspector General of Police, I won't give it to the Director General of the DSS or any other representative of law enforcement that wants to deprive me of this right. Justice Ajile said it in a case that I think it's Buhari and AMPP, where the court said that the role of the Nigerian police is not to prevent us from protesting, but to ensure that we enjoy all the protection that we are entitled to against hooligans.
Now, Justice,
when we are protesting.
Justice, let me just jump on Justice Ajile's comment there.
Yes.
When you talked about protection and how that is our right. This has happened. This is going to dampen the courage of most people who have dissenting voices. That's
Not necessarily.
let me
It's
finish
going to
that.
embolden them.
Just a second now.
Okay.
But the question is, if there is no call for a reform of police procedures itself and also prosecutorial discretion that we have, abuse as you call it, then that courage is still going to keep dwindling. You might have the courage, you're asking people to be like you, but to those who don't have as much courage and want to, they need to be sure that there's something backing them, and that's a call for these reforms. So where's that drive? I know we've got some protests from in the past for the police reform, but how big is that outcry as against governance? Because we're all yelling governance now and we're forgetting police reform. NSAS was, how long ago? Have we had anything the sort?
Okay, for me, I feel that there are a lot of procedures already in place to protect the average Nigerian person that wants to protest, and I just feel that it's being abused. I feel that it's been generally abused. The average policeman knows that the Anti-Terrorism Act is against him terrorizing any Nigerian, whether they are under his custody or protesting. The police procedures and a lot of laws, they are already fully in place.
Justice, I want to also hear from Akande on this. Akande, you heard the question. Let's talk about police reform and how agitation for that is not as loud as the agitation for good governance. What do you have to say about that?
Very correct. We have always put it forward that the overall system of policing itself needs to be reformed. And there has been so many discussions around that. Of course, it has not been allowed as the demands around ending bad governance in this country. But it's not something that we have laid to rest. We are still demanding that we need an overall reform of the policing or police system, policing system in Nigeria. And that itself needs to be done. We need to intensify efforts in making sure that that is done anytime, sooner than later. Because when you look at the conduct of the Nigerian police, it's quite barbaric, it's uncivilized, it's quite very, they behave more or less like a tout, like thugs. And that itself needs to be corrected. They should see themselves as part of the mass of the working class. And that's why some of our comrades have raised it. Even the needs for the police themselves to have a police union. Maybe by that they begin to realize that they themselves are part of us, and that anything that affects us affects them also. And so on the long run, I think it's something that we should look into, and I think we continue to lend our voices, making sure that that the system of policing in Nigeria is actually being reformed appropriately. There are so many things that are needed to be done. In short, no police is not supposed to be coming to a protest ground with ammunition, with live ammunition. I wrote a book this year, and I wrote it as part of the experience I had in this, during the last year August protest, where a police shot a live ammunition at someone and even shot tear gas canister at the very close person that was, one of the guys that was close to me. We had to use clothes to wrap the guy's head because of the loss of blood. And that itself is an act of barbarism. Police is not supposed to come to a protest ground with live ammunition, with all of these dangerous weapons. And I think we need to re-emphasize, reiterate the need for this police reform. And I think the channel like News Central will also help us in amplifying our voices, in lending our voices to make sure that this reform comes sooner than later.
Akande, thank you so much for your insights, as well as Justice here with us in the studio. I think it's an ongoing reform that eventually will come into play, and the right to express yourself using your voice and placards will soon find greater expression. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you, gentlemen. Let's go on a break now. We've got more conversation inside this hour and even after. Stay with us.
You're welcome back. And it is Human Rights Day in 2025. And of course, Human Rights Day this year reminds us that Nigeria of a gap that continues to widen between principles inherent in law and lived realities on the ground. Now, across the country, reports of arbitrary arrests, gender-based violence, and land disputes and restrictions of freedom of expression continue to challenge citizens in everyday rights. Observers argue that while Nigeria has ratified the international human rights conversions, translating these agreements into consistent, tangible protection for its people remains a work in progress. The day is meant to celebrate progress, but it also exposes the distance still to cover. Now, this year, the conversation takes on new urgency. Civil society groups are pushing for accountability, digital rights protection, and better policing practices. Human rights activists are drawing attention to communities where the law often fails to protect the most vulnerable, from internally displaced persons to marginalized youth. The challenge is to ensure that recognition of rights does not remain a statement in law books, but becomes a lived experience accessible to all Nigerians.
So, on this day, joining us to examine this critical issue are two voices deeply engaged in the fight for rights and accountability. Wilka Diash is the executive director of the Decide platform and a longtime activist working at the intersection of civic participation and also policy reform. We're also joined by Abiodun Abayewu, executive director of Global Rights, one of Nigeria's leading human rights advocacy organizations with decades of experience engaging communities and institutions of government on rights and protection. Gentleman and lady, or is lady and gentlemen, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us on Breakfast Extra.
Now, I think I'll start our question for Wilka Diash, the executive director, of course, the Design platform, from the works of a civil participation. Now, this is for you. What do you see as the most pressing human rights gap in Nigeria today, and why do they persist despite existing legal frameworks?
Pleasure to be here and discuss about the situation of the human rights in Nigeria, but maybe we can make some connection what's happening across the continent. I think right now Nigeria living one time, if you compare, it's like the same problems, the human rights problems, if you compare with the other countries across the continent. In one particular thing, we have that restriction of the freedom speech. After that freedom speech, we have the people see the activists, for example, the human rights defender, like the opposition side. But in particular, the human rights defenders are not the opposition person. So that is the principal reason to say we have a similar or common problems across the country and the continent. And in one other perspective, it's not only the freedom speech. We have in the other side the other type of conflicts are happening in Nigeria. For example, that violence of extremism violence in Nigeria. If you compare, we have terrorism groups in Nigeria, but also we have in the other parts across the country, the continent. So it's one of the most big problems we are suffering right now at this moment. And the violence against the women and etc. is the one other big problem who created some connections to support some other human rights defenders to living in exile at this moment. And we have a lot of Nigerian people are living in exile at this moment. So it's one other very big problem because we don't have a freedom to circulate it at this moment.
Thank you, Diash. Mrs. Bayewu, I'm going to come to you with this. I'm going to bridge the realities here when it comes to Nigerians. While we know that human rights is a thing, the truth is that most Nigerians don't actually know what these rights are. So how exactly can we bridge this gap of the lack of knowledge so every Nigerian has their rights protected?
Well, I'll say that let's start with the media, and I would say each one teach one as well. Let's start with the media because the amplification of the things that should matter in society lies with you, and the power to do so is with you. Initiatives such as the one that you started this morning are critical. Civil society as well. In the classrooms, at schools, we should advocate for human rights to be a fundamental part of what people learn in Nigeria. But that brings me to a very fundamental problem in Nigeria. Nigeria has the most number of out-of-school children in the world. More than 20 million children out of school in Nigeria means that we're raising another 20 million people who are not literate in languages through which we can advocate and teach human rights. It also means that they will grow to be adults who will not be able to understand basic tenets of society and of education. Apart from 20 million children out of school, the quality of education as well makes it very difficult to pass complex ideas. Human rights are basic ideas, but then even those are not passed when we can't get people into school or into forms of learning.
And how has your organization helped when it comes to these kinds of challenges that we have? I'm going to ask Diaz perhaps maybe if he also has a suggestion there, but Ms. Bayo, how has your organization or other organizations helped the situation?
Well, I would say that particularly in Nigeria, civil society has done a lot and the media has done a lot. One of the things we do is build the capacity of the media. So we continue to hold trainings on human rights and the different tenets of human rights for the media. For my organization, we're a capacity building organization. We're consistently training at the grassroots level. We're on radio as well, training Nigerians on what their rights are and the actualization of those rights. We work with government as well to better improve on delivering those rights to citizens. And so, yes, we do a lot of work, specific rights, working with on equitable resource governance, protecting the rights of mining host communities, working with mining host communities across Nigeria, working on issues of gender, of participation in government, of civic space strengthening, and helping everyday Nigerians to see how their rights are in practice protected and not just the letter of the law.
Now, Wilker, I'd like to piggyback off of Mazino's question because you join us from Mozambique. And, you know, when you look at Mozambique, we commend people like Eduardo Mondlane, who pioneered, human rights and unity. Your organization and some of the reforms that you have institutionalized in Mozambique, how can we piggyback off that and perhaps emulate some of those in Nigeria?
We work sometimes with some organizations in Nigeria, like Yaga, for example, is one of them. And what the type of work we do at this moment, we give a training. I think the most important right now is give a tool to the people to develop their skills in the human rights, to have more knowledge about the human rights, about the democracy process, and other different process in the law in global. So it's very important to give that training because the most part of the times we have some simple tools in our hand and we don't use it. For example, if we use the social media to disseminate the information about the human rights in the one most funny thing, use the funny form to give that skills to that knowledge to the people. It's one very big win for us. So at the most part of the time, so we give a training, but we have the different type of things we can use during this training to be more attractive to the people. And in the other side, we make the advocacy process to the people in the different regions, in the most important regions who are suffering with the human rights violations. And it's one form to try to teach and to show the people what's happening and what is the way if we can follow if we have some other problem. And finally, we have in the other sector the international perspective. When we work together in block, maybe we call them, if we call run united, maybe we can win more. And if we run together with different perspectives, like Mozambique, Nigeria, if you go to South Africa, if you go to Gambia, and etc., maybe we can have more people with more knowledge in what's happening in other countries, and we find solutions together to try to develop in our countries, and we have one more human rights defenders and etc.
This is a very interesting concept here Diaz, you're in Mozambique. Inem here is from South Africa. I'm Nigerian. I'm assuming Mrs. Bayo is Nigerian alongside me. And I'm wondering where the similarities are when it comes to violations that we suffer in these different countries. Also taking into account the fact that we have different levels of perhaps education across the spectrum of citizens in these countries. Mrs. Bayo, from your engagement with the public or with violations that you must have heard, are there any statistics to show exactly what kinds of violations are most rampant in countries like Nigeria, especially while we're talking about the Nigerian realities?
That's a great question. I think first, the right to life and the number of people who are killed in the fields of mass atrocities across Nigeria every year. And that's a very critical work that my organization, Global Rights, also does in Nigeria, is we started to tally the numbers from 2017 till date on the number of Nigerians that are killed in fields of mass atrocities. If you do not have the right to life, you cannot actualize any other human right. And when we think about the right to life, you also need to think about the quality of life, that Nigerians consistently live below poverty lines. If you live in abject poverty, we will not be able to protect the right to life. So, for example, poverty is also driving a lot of women to death. Every 10 minutes, a woman dies of childbirth-related maternal mortality in Nigeria. So a woman dying every 10 minutes to childbirth-related issues means that Nigeria is losing about 40,000 women every year in a war. That's too many soldiers. And Nigeria doesn't seem to be afraid to lose those many people. So I would start with the right to life, the right to education as well, because it affects the quality of citizens and their ability to improve their livelihoods, to improve their conditions of living, to improve their health and their environment, and of course, the society itself. So I would say that let's start with the right to life. Let's also tackle poverty, and we would have tackled a large chunk of the issues in Nigeria. Let's also not forget that the Nigerian Constitution mandates that the government should ensure the dignity of all citizens. Right to life, dignity, education, focus on those three, and we're on our way.
Education, but there are other smaller violations that happen that people don't take into recognition. For instance, in the British House, there was a motion that was moved regarding the rights to disassociate. As well, if you have the rights to association, you must have the right to disassociation, because there are religious bodies that actually prevent people from disassociating themselves from specific bodies. Now, do we consider these other kinds of detail when it comes to our rights as human beings in Nigeria, or do we just treat them as, it's uncommon, we really don't need these? When do we start focusing on these other smaller rights that people don't consider every day? May I ask that Diaz goes first, and what the situation might be like in Mozambique when it comes to this?
So I think that is the one very, we call small, but if we make one analysis or one general analysis, it's a worse scenario in particular. It's not only, for example, the association rights and etc., but if you have other things we are called smalls, and the most part of the times we don't put in the mind, that is the one, a very big problem. For example, for food, that is the one human right, and we need to talk about that type of things with the people, because the most part of the time said, no, this is the one economic crisis, and I think that is not happening only in Mozambique. We see in Nigeria, we see in the other different types of different countries across the continent. But the right for food, for example, it's one of the most important rights, because we have a right to life, we have that right to food, because without food, you cannot survive. And after that, we can talking about the association, we can talking about the other type of right. So it's a very important topic to discuss, the right for food. And in the conflict zones, in the conflict areas, that's happening too much, and we don't talking about the right for food. And it's important, very important.
Okay, Ms. Bayo, we want to go on that freedom of association / disassociation. Mrs. Bayo?
Inalienable, and they're interconnected. You can't reduce one. Once you remove a person's right to disassociate, implicit in the right, the freedom of association is the freedom to disassociate as well. And you can't remove that. If a person decides, for example, I do not want to belong to this religious order, you cannot force that. You begin to force that, you begin to impede on their right to dignity, on their right to self-determination, all both rights protected by the Constitution. You begin to do that, then you begin to reduce their quality of life. Once you've taken dignity out, dignity is what separates us from animals. And once you start to do that, you are impeding on their fundamental human rights. So never think of any right as being smaller than any other right. They're all interrelated. People get killed for what they believe, for the things they associate with and the things they disassociate with, and they must equally be protected.
Very much, ma'am.
Thank you so much for your time. But before we move on to the next story, News Central has a human rights package that we'd like to draw to your attention. Let's take a look.
The worst human rights abuses in Africa are brutal attacks on civilians, leaving massive suffering and loss. Here are 7 of the worst human rights abuses in Africa. The Boko Haram insurgency in Nigeria, beginning in the year 2009. This was marked by mass village massacres, abductions of women and children, suicide bombings, and the wiping out of communities. Modern slavery and trafficking across Africa today. There are an estimated 7 million victims of forced labor and sexual exploitation. This ranges from child minors in the Democratic Republic of Congo to trafficked women in Nigeria and Libya. The violent protest crackdowns in Kenya in 2023 and 2024, police carried out killings, torture, abductions, and hundreds of arbitrary arrests. Now, the Rwanda genocide in 1994, about 800,000 people, mainly Tutsi, were slaughtered in 100 days through mass killings and genocidal rape. The Nigerian Civil War, also called the Biafran War, from 1967 to 1970, a blockade-engineered mass famine. Over 1 million civilians, mostly children, died. The Cameroon Anglophone crisis since 2016, we have seen executions, village burnings, school attacks, and mass displacement amid brutal repression. The Darfur crisis in Sudan since 2003. This is defined by large-scale killings, systematic sexual violence, and raids that burned down villages and forced people to leave. This and many more are exactly why the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948 still matters today. It matters to protect people across Nigeria, Africa, and of course, the world. Happy Human Rights Day.
Now, with that being said, I'd like to direct one question to Wilka, if he's still with us. Wilka, my question for you is, in terms of statistics, I don't want us to go too far. I want us to look at it in Africa, then maybe we can branch into internationally. Is there a show of, in terms of ranking, of course, which country has the highest number in human violations?
We have different types of perspectives for now. We can divide, for example, in the terrorism or the extremism violence across the continent. We have Nigeria on the list. We have Mozambique in the list because Mozambique are leaving the conflict in Cabo Delgado for now. We have the crisis in Sudan. We have the other type of crisis. But I think for now, these 4 or 5 countries is on the top 10 of the countries who are suffering with the most type of violence. And we can divide in the other perspective of the right to protest. For example, in the right to protest, we have the other type of the violations in particular. We saw that in Kenya. We saw that in Nigeria. We saw that right now in Nigeria. In Mozambique. We saw that in Tanzania. We saw that in the other countries. So we have in the different perspectives for now. And if we can divide, we will see there's so many types of the violations we have in the different perspectives in different countries. But we have some countries who have a similar type of problems. If we compare, for example, Mozambique and Nigeria, we have the extremist violence, we have the abductions of the civilians, we have a very large number of the people who are displaced of their place. For example, in Mozambique, we have only on this year more than 1 million of the people displaced from that local areas because we have the terrorism in the north of Mozambique for now. So that is the one very urgent problem. We need that solution, and I think right now the African people is the solution to try to solve that problem. But we need to have the that type of the political reasons also to solve that problem, because the politicians have the key to try to solve that problem, and I think the solution is on their hand.
I want to say thank you very much, and Mrs. Abiodun Bayewu, thank you very much for being on our session where we discuss Human Rights Day 2025. Well, we hope that every human will be able to get their rights, whether to life, whether to freedom of speech, whether association, and live a, well, human life at the end of the day. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much, ma'am, for joining us.
And now it's time for our weekly escape, where the world comes to your screen and your morning cup of coffee, not hot chocolate. Get a passport. Welcome to Waka Waka World, the premium tourism segment where we follow Waka Waka Doctor, travel influencer and immigration expert, as he journeys across the globe exploring cities, cultures, people, and cuisines, bringing the experiences straight to you right here on Breakfast Extra. Today, Waka Waka Doctor takes us to a truly unique destination, the only suspended lake in Africa. That's right, a lake that seems to defy gravity, hanging above the landscape like a natural wonder, suspended in time. Let's take a look.
Welcome to Adwawaye, home to one of the world's rarest natural wonders. The only suspended lake in Africa. No, scratch that. There are only 2 suspended lakes in the world, and one of them is right here in Edo State, Nigeria. This is Waka Waka Doctor, and you're welcome to this episode of Waka Waka World. On this episode, I'm going to be showing you the only suspended lake in Africa. Come with me. Whew. Getting to this lake is no mean feat. I mean, it's not a walk in the park. Whew. You've got to walk 300 steps. To witness this beauty, oh my God, to witness this beauty, you've got to break a lot of sweat. But the thing is, by the time you see this breathtaking view, then it's worth every drop of sweat. This view is better than anything else in the world.
For then I enjoy it, I'm enjoying it.
I am so excited because this is the first stop. After a few steps up this rock, the first thing you're going to see is this mystical rock called Ishage Rock. It's mystical for the people of Adoawaye because it serves two purposes. Number one, you can come here to make a wish. Yes, people come here to make a wish every day, every week, and every year. When the wish is granted, they often tie a white cloth around it to show appreciation. And after many weeks, the white cloth goes away by itself. The second thing is that this rock serves as a rainmaker. So whenever there's a period of drought or when there's no rain in town, the priestess would often come here to enchant this rock to give them rain. Whether or not it happens, I don't know, but that's the story. This little gem nestled in the mountains of Edo State is as real as it gets. Let's start from the top. What exactly is a suspended lake? It's not a lake that's hanging in thin air. I mean, that would be some next level sci-fi stuff like Keanu Reeves in Matrix. But a suspended lake is one that sits high on the mountain and is within its natural depression. It's unlike any other lake that you find in lower altitudes. So for everyone watching, meet Iyake Lake. It's a beauty and a natural wonder. You can't visit this place without reading the legends. There's so many stories about Iyake Lake. Some people say it's a connection between the physical world and the spiritual world. In fact, some people say that it is bottomless. I mean, whatever goes in doesn't come out. So I'm gonna try and but I mean, that's what the story says. Ibolawai.
Where exactly are we?
We are on Mount Adoawaye.
What is the history behind this lake?
The lake is a mystery to people in older generation. That there was a lady that has a very good heart and she's very loving to the villagers. But they never liked her. They kept fighting with her. She is believed to turn into the lake out of annoyance. The lake is bigger than what people perceive. It is also an endless river.
So someone cannot swim inside this lake?
Yes, no one can swim inside this lake. The lake has an endless depth and it is endless. There is also an elephant tree by the lake that shows that God is great.
Yes, truly God is great. Does this lake have any supernatural power?
People perceive the lake to be powerful. That's why they come to the lake for prayers and supplication. Some people bathe with the water while others drink the water.
Okay. History has it that the person who turned into this lake is barren and she comes to this mountain to cry and her tears turn into the lake. Is that why it is called Iyake? Is it true?
That's very true and accurate.
Well, you've heard from a local who grew up within this community and he's just told us about the secrets, the power, the mystery behind this Iyake Lake. It's something you definitely want to see and I'll encourage you to visit it. Another attraction site right here on the top of the mountain is this. It's called the elephant tree. It's actually the roots of a fallen baobab tree. Yes. Whether or not you can climb this, I think so. Yeah. Woo! Fantastic. This is definitely one thing you need to see when you visit Adoawaye. From ancient myths to stunning landscapes, Iyake Lake offers something for everyone. Whether you like science, beauty, mystery, or just pure adventure. So what are you waiting for? Pack your bags, pick up a camera, book your flight, go to the airport, take a plane, come to Edo State, Nigeria. I'll be waiting now, I won't be there, but you can see this beauty. Till I see you again in another episode, it's Waka Waka Doctor. Cheers.
Waka Waka World there, brought to you by Waka Waka Dr. Fantastic. I'm jealous. I want to live his life. Well, what am I saying? I do live his life, actually.
You actually do.
Yeah. I haven't been to Yaki Lake before. It's only just here in Oyo State, and I'm wondering why I haven't done that, because it's not too far compared to some of the places I've been to in Nigeria. Only just last month, for the first time in my life, I got to enjoy my romance with Joss.
Oh, wow.
And it was a beautiful experience to see the landscape change as you drive through. I loved it. I cried at the end of that tour. It was beautiful. But you see these kinds of things all the time in South Africa, where you're from now, don't you?
I mean, we do, but you know what it is about. Sometimes when you are from a place, you don't necessarily explore it dramatically. You know, friends of mine still laugh at the fact that I've never been to Cape Town. It's on my bucket list, but I have been to Jos.
Okay, wait. Say that you've never been to Cape Town?
I've never been to Cape Town.
No.
But it's on my bucket list.
Well, let's keep it here in Nigeria. You have been to Jos.
I've been to Jos. I mean, I've done a bit of Nigeria. I've been to Jos. I've been to Kaduna. The first time I came to Nigeria, the first state I went to was Kogi State.
Kogi State.
So I went as far as like Aimba.
Oh.
Yes. I went to Nasarawa and a few other cities.
Oh.
So, I mean, it's beautiful. It's beautiful to be in the outskirts and come out of the city for a bit.
Wow, that is interesting. That's grand. So, hey, you're Nigerian now.
Yes. With many names. I've got a name for every tribe that I've participated
that's
in
fantastic.
or at least experienced. Yeah.
Oh, you got that explorer spirit then, and that's good.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, now we're going to go right into our next segment here for today, and let's talk West Africa and everything happening with the rising coup situation and all the different relationships. West Africa has entered a moment of deep unease as the economic community of West African states warns the region is facing what is described as a state of emergency after a string of military coups, attempted coups, and worsening security conditions. The ECOWAS Commission President Omar Touare made the declaration during a session of the Mediation and Security Council in Abuja, noting that the spate of unconstitutional power grabs, most recently a thwarted takeover attempt in Benin Republic, threatens democratic gains across the sub-region and could unravel years of progress on governance and stability. Member states are now grappling with political fragility, weakening institutions, and regional insecurity on multiple fronts. For Nigeria, this moment lands close to home, only next door. In response to the attempted coup in Benin Republic, the Nigerian Senate declared the deployment of troops and air support as part of a regional standby force acting under ECOWAS mandate, highlighting Abuja's role as both a neighbor and security anchor in West Africa. At the same time, recent coups in Guinea-Bissau, the lingering instability across the Sahel, and the exit of several junta-led states from ECOWAS deepens the questions about the bloc's ability to enforce democratic norms, protect its citizens, and sustain regional cooperation. Now, this development are more than diplomatic footnotes. They shape how Nigeria's experience security, trade, and also political influence across the borders are.
Now, to help us make sense of what this, and I quote, state of emergency means for West Africa in general, but for Nigeria in particular, we are joined by Alexander von Rugen, a global affairs policy analyst, and Dennis Amakri, a national security analyst. Their perspectives will help us unpack the geopolitical and practical implications for stability in our neighborhood. Let's welcome them to Breakfast Central. Mazino.
Welcome very much, gentlemen. Now, Alexander, I'm going to start with you, Alexander, before I come to Dr. Amakri. Alexander, ECOWAS leaders have described the current situation as an emergency. Now, in practical terms, do you think that this is what it is? And how strategic how strategic is Nigeria placed in all of this? Or strategically is Nigeria placed in all of this?
Well, the term emergency, I think, is befitting because it's existential for ECOWAS to remain in power. Nigeria being the lead country and the largest in the union has to assert itself. And this recent occurrence in Benin is a case in point. It was barely a coup. It was a handful of military personnel that took over at duty station. But they had to assert themselves that they would react to the threat of a coup in a neighboring country.
For you, Mr. Dennis Amakri, I mean, this is a bit of a dent when it comes to Nigeria's strength. I think my question for you is, how does this affect Nigeria's ability to respond and, of course, take its role when we take a look at the coups that are affecting diplomacy and the influence within the region?
Thank you very much. Actually, the president of Nigeria is the chairman of the ECOWAS. And of course, when things like this are happening very close to home, I think the response was good. You cannot afford to allow a coup. There are coups that have been going on, about 5 of them been going on throughout West Africa. And if this one is very close to call, it's close to home. And you can see how the president reacted. Don't forget that there was an attempted coup in Nigeria, you know, and of course, with the wave of coups that is now sweeping across West Africa, just like in the 60s, you know, we have a time when the whole of West Africa was ruled by military rule. So this trend is starting all over again, and I think being the chairman of ECOWAS and of course trying to make sure that this does not happen again, the Nigerians reacted because it will affect us more than it will affect anybody else. Nigeria is the biggest country in West Africa, and any change of government there will be very, very disastrous.
Dr. Amakri, I want to come to you still, and let's talk about relationships now. Let's talk about the relationship between the rest of democratic West Africa and the new Sahel bloc. We've seen situations where certain postures seem to indicate flexing of muscles, let's put it so. So what's our relationship going to be like now, whether it's Nigeria versus the Sahel bloc or the rest of democratic West Africa and the Sahel bloc? What should we be looking at happening? So far, we've seen some movement or agitation when it comes to a Nigerian asset landing in Burkina Faso and all the tongue wag that has caused. What's your take on this?
Well, you know that Nigeria, when they say ECOWAS, it is Nigeria they're talking about. Because when, the coup in Benin was foiled by some assistance from, they said, Ghana, Ivory Coast, and Sierra Leone. You know, they sent some troops. But majorly, it was Nigerian fighter jets that were flying all over the place and then maybe scaring the hell out of the coup plotters. It's Nigeria, actually. So even when this happened, the first time when Niger Republic had a coup, remember, as as chairman of the ECOWAS, he announced that they were going to, invade Niger Republic, and they gave them 72 hours. And of course, the Nigerian Senate and others, other Nigerian people spoke against it because this is our neighbor, and going there with arms and invading the country is not going to be the best solution. And that has remained like that. It simmered down. There was no invasion, nothing happened, and stuff like that. And of course, you're talking about the jet that landed in Burkina Faso. I don't know if that jet has been allowed to travel back to where it was going to, but they stopped it, and it shows you that the relationship between these AES countries and Nigeria is very, very dicey. And I think that Nigeria has to do more, because you cannot rule, or should I say, bring all the West African countries together by arms and ammunition. It has to be by diplomatic means, and I think that's the way to go.
Okay. Now, I'll go to you, Mr. von Rugen. We see, despite what's taking place, we still see great power regions and countries still finding an interest in the Western region, despite the current crises that are taking place right now. So we look at the power play, and we look at the power economies that are still invested. How do these responses shape the response of the West in the crises right now?
It falls back on the amount of coups that have been in Africa. In fact, it's called the coup belt. Oh, wow. There's been so many of them. There's been 11 successful coups since 2020. Primarily, they've been in Francophone Africa. Mm-hmm. If we want to look back on colonial times, the French were probably the worst colonialists of all. Case in point, Haiti. The fact that most of the coups have happened in Francophone Africa also speaks for itself. But the West is gathering now because when power sense weakness, they tend to take advantage of it. Africa is rich in resources. Yeah. They're poor in governance. They need assistance. I think what they're reaching out for is in a neo-colonialist era, they're looking for the best deal, and they're making bad choices. Russia currently right now with the Africa Corps, or the former Wagner forces, are assisting the Sahel Union, primarily Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, with defending themselves against jihadists. They amassed for that reason. Ironically, Nigeria has its own problem with Boko Haram and Islamic terrorists coming in through border countries and causing havoc in your eastern provinces. Nigeria has been criticized here in reacting to a coup in Benin, but not reacting militarily to conflict within their own country on the alleged Christian genocide and the threats made by President Trump. They have a political dilemma right now for asserting themselves as a lead nation in West Africa. Mm-hmm. And I think they're desperate right now to make some attempts to prove that they are effective. This quick military response, jets being sortied across Benin quickly, was a show of strength. Yet they had a brigadier general that was captured and assassinated a month ago in the eastern provinces, and there was no military reaction. Right. There was analysis. There was a lot of talking. There was condolences. But how is it a brigadier general can be captured and executed within the country and not stimulate a military reaction, unless, of course, there's corruption from within? That's a question we have to ask ourselves.
Now, Mr. Van Rugen, it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting that you make mention of that, because interestingly enough, this was a question that was raised in Abuja to the foreign minister, Yusuf Tugar. And of course, the question there was, Nigeria's got their own problems internally. Is Nigeria the right candidate or the right big brother to hold hands with Benin and lead them out of this situation? This is a question because of what you've just said. I'd like to get your opinion on that. Is Nigeria of course they are the head of ECOWAS right now, so they have to respond, but are they the right candidate or the right nation right now to partner with Benin and lead them out of this situation?
Are you asking the question to me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, well, I don't think there's another choice. Nigeria is the largest, they hold the seat for ECOWAS. They're the largest nation. They have the largest military. They would be the appropriate response team. But there's so much confusion going around in the area, such as in the Sahel. such as criticisms from President Trump to invade the country with guns a-blazing. Well, we all know that's President Trump's rhetoric. He would need a UN resolution to do that. The only way he could enter Nigeria is if it's not state-sponsored and there is a genocide going on, there'd be a resolution required, and they could intervene through UN forces and American forces. That's the threat was made. But it wasn't really a threat. It was a strong warning. It was, if you can't fix your own problem, we'll come in and fix it for you. Here's the irony. Nigeria's gone to France, Macron, the colonial country that has all the problems with coups for assistance. I find that ironic.
Right.
France has been kicked out of Niger, Chad, Mali, Burkina Faso. They want to assert themselves because they felt the French were taking advantage of them with C.H. Frank, the management of half their foreign exchange assets. There was a lot of reasons for it. France is reinventing itself in these neo-colonial times to now be an advisor and assistance and logistics, offer surveillance and military consulting for these countries to govern themselves. They're reinventing themselves. They have to establish a renewed credibility in the area because they've lost it. African nations have to make a decision. What is the best way to go? The Russian solution in the Sahel is putting a Band-Aid on a bleeding artery. That's a short-term solution. The Chinese, who have invested in Africa, have created death spiral financing by supplying substandard infrastructure. And they bring in their own labor. They don't help Africans establish trade. Okay, so to get out of this slump, Africa needs to reassess on multilateral fronts how to move forward and who they want to partner with in that trade. And I call it trade now because the aid packages have evaporated. That's one thing President Trump initiated when he dissolved U.S. aid and he defunded the UN. We all know the UN is an impotent organization when it seems to curbing violence. They come in as advisors and so-called peacemakers. They're not allowed to shoot back unless someone shoots at them, yet they can witness atrocities happening in front of them. That's, in my book, unacceptable.
Alexander, that's a very interesting response here, and I want to piggyback off of that. I don't know if anybody is noticing what's at play here, the bigger geopolitical relationships or lack of relationships that's happening. We have the Sahel nations, which were mostly French colonized, rejecting these vestiges of French colonialism and allying themselves with countries like Russia. And here we have Nigeria. Even if we still fraternize with the French, we still have a partnership that seems to be budding with America. And it's beginning to seem like there is that relationship, or, you know, it's funny where you have the Russia-America thing going on here within Africa itself. Am I the only one who's seeing this? Dr. Amakri, what do you think?
Oh, you see, the geopolitical dance is really good right now. And many people say that it's a new scramble for Africa.
Exactly.
You know, a new scramble for Africa because all the superpowers, so to say, are trying to take a grab, or should I say, have a bite in Africa, which is, of course, till today, the richest continent with all the natural resources that the world needs. You know, and after independence, some of the colonial masters were still hanging around their colonies, so to say, and you'll see that some of the independence was actually on paper, like the French countries. You know, the CFA franc that the West African Francophone countries are using is tied to the French franc. And In fact, the Central Bank of France is the one controlling whatever happens in the West African countries. And it is so deep that they are really tied to the apron strings of France. Now, when we look at it very, very closely, these countries are waking up and they are saying, no, we cannot, continue this. And France was not diplomatic enough. It was still using the, should I say, the colonial style in dealing with these guys. These people have to find out how much uranium is costing in the world market and how much France is taking from them and how much they are giving to the countries. So that was the case in Niger Republic. And of course, Burkina Faso, Mali, if you look at it very closely, you find out that most of the countries that have just had coups are French-speaking. They're all French-speaking. And it's a real hit on the French president, because I think if he does not take care, if he runs an election today, he might lose, because most of the colonies that were under France are going away and they're leaving. And I think he's worried too. So that's why we even had this story about whether it was France that asked Nigeria to go and fly over Benin Republic, but it was an ECOWAS mandate. Okay. So I think everybody is trying to catch a piece of the pie. China is there, ready to do their own in their own way. Russia is
Dr. Makri,
at the Francophone countries.
So Dr. Makri,
of course,
Dr. Makri,
Nigeria
now with what you have just said, sir, with what you have just said, with everybody trying to grab a piece of the West African pie, we know what the countries allied with Russia, that's the Sahel belt or the coup belt as Von Rugen has put it, what they stand to gain when it comes to resources. But with Nigeria, what exactly might they have to gain if they were to be allied or be successful at grabbing that West African strategic point of Nigeria? What could Nigeria give back? What are they eyeing, in quote, in Nigeria?
I didn't understand your question very well.
Now,
you're saying that what is Nigeria going to gain, or what are the big powers going to gain?
How strategically placed is Nigeria in all of this, in everything going on, for any country that is interested in grabbing the Nigerian instance? Any country that's interested in allying with Nigeria?
Okay, like we said earlier, Nigeria is the largest country in West Africa. It has the largest population of black people all over the world. And of course, it's loaded with natural resources. It's a very, very rich country. But the problem is that, of course, the riches have been frittered away, whereby some individuals are even richer than the country, or they are very rich, all combined, while the country, people are still moving in squalor. Now, it's not as bad as some of the West African countries, but Nigerian government need to address the frustration, the insecurity, all these attacks we are having from insurgents and bandits and stuff like that. They are all in for the natural resources. The problem with Nigeria is not religion. It is not ethnicity. It is the very, very robust and rich criminal economy that is going on right now in Nigeria. The criminal economy that is going on in Nigeria. And what is going on now is something that either the government take care of it or control it where the people will gain, or foreign countries are ready. In fact, some Chinese were even arrested in Zamfara State, where they've come in and they were shipping out gold and stuff like that. France is still looking for new markets where they can trade, you know, and they try to align with Nigeria, you know. The United States itself, many people have said it, that it's not just because they are trying to fight against Christian genocide. It is because of maybe the rare earth minerals and stuff like that that are in there, and it could be a cover to enter into Nigeria, because Nigeria itself is not concentrating on giving it to their American allies. So these are geopolitics that is going on, and I think Nigeria need to sit back and look at it properly.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Van Rugen, I'd like to also just piggyback off of that question, because I'd like to hear from your view. But I'd like to structure it in a way where, outside of us just maybe looking at Nigeria because we are in the West, there are so many different governing bodies within Africa. We've got ECOWAS, and we've also got the African Union that tends to remain a bit silent and stagnant when it comes to situations like this, outside of what Nigeria can achieve, because it is a continental kind of partnerships. You did mention the partnerships. So I'd like to hear from you, from an African standpoint, if we do get that partnership right, what is it that, what's the shift that we can expect from Africa as a whole?
8% of the current world's population. The birth rate in Africa is 4 times greater than it is in the Western world right now. I know in Canada, for example, the average couple produces 1.1 children. In Africa, it's 4.3. Even in China, it's below 1 now.
Wow.
And depending on what country you are in Europe, it ranges between 1 and 1.5. In the Middle East, it's the only one that is higher, but it's still half of what Africa is. So from a global perspective, Africa is growing faster than any other area on the planet. It also has the most conflicts of anywhere on the planet. There's over 50 conflicts raging in Africa right now. So as a union, it has to demonstrate it can govern itself. I think, you know, and this is the taboo topic, we have to look at institutionalized corruption. We have to look is Nigeria afraid of Trump getting involved in helping them clean up the problem? Because he did offer assistance, although his bedside manner is sometimes a little threatening, but he offered assistance. But when you get assistance from America, it will expose a lot of the local corruption. And I think people are fearful of that. Whereas with France, they catered to corruption. The CF franc enabled the elites in Africa to move their money to Europe and hide it and stay in power. And that's, you know, that's a business model, but it's not a sustainable one, especially with the growing Gen Zers that are frustrated and feel they don't have a future. African countries have over 70% of their population under 25 or 30 years of age. This is a generation that's never grown up without an internet. They're well informed. They can amass themselves in the millions by the click of a cell phone button on the internet. And if you look at the latest uprisings throughout Africa, Kenya, Madagascar, Mozambique, soon to be, well, Tanzania, you can have Islamic jihadists creating terrorist situations, but the Gen Zers are the ones, they're not jihadis, they're not terrorists. They want a future, they're African. And they're sick and tired of the institutionalized corruption that ignores them and their rights. So until all of that is resolved, there's many facets to these problems. They have to be attended to, and it's complicated, and it's sectoral, and there's a lot of moving parts. So to give you a one answer to your question is impossible. It's multifaceted. It will take a concerted effort, but there has to be a willingness. And when corruption stands in the way, unfortunately, those decisions are made by how much money is going to go in my pocket before I vote on something, as opposed to what can I do for my people to ensure peace and a thriving nation.
Mr. Van Rugen, my last question would be to you, and it's on posture, and it's going to go back to the instance of the C-130 in Burkina Faso. Many people have said that perhaps maybe it's just a sense of quelling what they call ideological contagion, telling that, hey, we've got our finger on this. We could do anything we want if we choose to as a West African superpower. So what does that say for the remaining democratic nations in West Africa? Are we trying to assert ourselves as still dominant over whatever might be happening in the coup belt?
Well, to land a C-130 Hercules without a plan is a plan to fail. The narrative has changed on this story. I'm hearing stories that it was on a major maintenance trip to Portugal. Okay, well, I'm a pilot.
Oh, nice.
Protocol dictates you have a crew of a pilot, co-pilot, a flight engineer, and maybe an extra party on the plane. Why were there 11 soldiers on the plane? Were they all mechanics? Was it a security detail to protect the plane in Portugal, which is a non-threatening nation? And why did they have to land in Burkina Faso? You know, the narrative has changed on this, and I don't know the answer, but it seems to be people are scrambling for a plausible excuse. If it was to show power in Burkina Faso, I'm sure Captain Traore would have laughed at that.
Well, thank you for that response. I think I'll buy that.
All right, gentlemen, thank you both for helping us slice through the headlines and reveal the deeper stakes for this part of the continent. And as West Africa confronts this emergency, the question of governance, security, and collective action will shape the well-being of millions, including our own citizens at home and abroad.
Once again, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us for our last session today for Breakfast Extra. Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Indeed, it has been a pleasure with all our guests and with you the very first time on Breakfast Extra. Are you coming back tomorrow?
Yes, I am.
You are?
I definitely am.
We didn't burn you out?
You did
3
not.
hours of sitting down in here?
It was the coffee.
It was the No, it's the chocolates. In any case, that's our show for today. We do have another installment for a Sunday morning. Join us bright and early tomorrow, 8 o'clock. We've got some coffee, to spill then. And of course, I'm looking forward to the monologue because Inam's got a very interesting take on the issues inside of West Africa then. So, from us right now, it's goodbye.